should we start a new discussion? That one's going on and on. Well, you know, we at AFT have been in dialogue with social organizations and political issues and broadened issues of the economics and fairness down through the years, you know, and as we've been attacked by the Koch brothers and all of the Pearsons and all of those people out here at state level, they've been trying to shut our voice down collectively. And we have had to find a way to fight back. One of the things Randy said to me when she and I came in, we were at a pivotal point, and we had a window of opportunity to change the narrative. So how do we change the narrative of bad teachers, bad school employees, everything in the public schools is wrong? What do we do as a national organization to change the culture within our locals? How do we make that change? So we came up with the idea of community engagement and going back to our roots. You know, that's what the schools used to be. Most of the teachers knew every student in that district in their schools. And they knew who the next class was coming up, who they were going to get. They knew sisters and brothers and all of the family kind of piece. We could go out in the community at any time. I remember my 6th grade graduation, I went out in the community with my 6th grade teachers and did census. That was the day we knocked on doors and did the census. I learned my first civic lesson from my 6th grade teacher. We don't have that kind of interaction in our community any longer. And so Randy and I, she talked about it, we had a conversation. She said, all right, we're gonna have to spend money, we're gonna have to do something. So we set up the community engagement piece about 4 years ago, and I remember I had to go out and talk to the state feds and get them involved. And what it looked like is here we come with another program, and I'm getting eaten up by the Koch brothers' money, collective bargaining is attack. I got all kinds of legislations in, charter schools down there. Now here come the national with another program. And we had to engage our state federation presidents and then our local presidents. And we had to engage them so that they understood what community engagement was. You couldn't just run out and say, hey, I'm drowning, come and help me. You had to go out there and be involved in that community. And so we did that. You've heard all the stories, Philadelphia, Florida, and all the places where that community engagement have come together. And we've been mobilizing, and that's what it is, mobilizing our members, coming together, standing together, working together to tackle the biggest challenge facing our community and us. Hey, do you know AFT gonna be 100 years old? And we've always led the way in the fight for equality and justice. And last year, our executive council took up another issue, which was a bold step for me as an African-American woman. We set up a task force talking on racial equality to address the challenging that faces black boys and men in this country. And today, while we have a black president, our nation is still full of racial inequalities. And just a couple of months ago, the unrest in my hometown of Baltimore, when Freddie Gray died in the police custody after being arrested illegally. I mean, you should have seen my face. What I saw on TV happening in my hometown. So we had already established our task force, so we were a step ahead of the president coming out talking about, let's talk about it. Here in AFT, your executive council had already said, let's talk about what is happening. The task force that we set up have, since last October, have traveled across the country, talked to our members, talked about issues facing black men in the community they serve, and we've approached our members who have said, it is about time. and they're ready to roll up their sleeves and take on this issue. I had my first task force meeting in Baltimore last month in June. But the task force is just one example of the work we're doing with the community to build deep and lasting coalition. What are the best things to do to mobilize around? What has worked and what hasn't worked? This is what we want to talk about with you here today. We want to hear from you and talk about what is going on in our country. To save our democracy, it's education, it's economics, and racial injustice. Those are the three topics. So the mics are open.
Good evening, Susan Solomon from United Educators of San Francisco. So there's a couple different things I wanted to mention. One is I specifically want to thank Loretta Johnson for how she helped get a Black Lives Matter resolution the way it should be. Because I know we started one in San Francisco that then went to California, went up the lines, and everywhere along the line, people would say, but all lives matter. But all lives matter. And to me, that feels like during the women's movement, we should have said, but what about men's rights? Saying that Black Lives Matter doesn't take away from other lives. It enhances what needs to be done. And we have to keep saying it. Doesn't mean we don't care about brown lives and white lives and so on. But right now, Black Lives Matter. So I want to thank you for that.
I'm just a mom, a grandmom, and a great-grandmom, still fighting for racial equity.
Yeah.
And someday maybe we'll stop saying I'm just a mom.
That's right.
It's a big thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about was community organizing with the community. So in San Francisco, we have our Close the Gap Coalition. It's been going on for a couple of years. What helped start it was a training that I think was 4 years ago or 5 years ago in Atlanta. And to me, an AFT training. The biggest takeaway from there was if you're just getting started, you can't go to community organizations and faith-based organizations and say, we need help from you. What can you do for us? You've got to say, we're here. What can we do for you? What matters? What do you need for your children, and how can we help you? And that's how we can start to forge real relationships and not just opportunistic moments. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want me to read one of these? Yeah. I have a...
Wait. Let me just say, and we have one other topic, but Pete Dominic, whose train was delayed, is going to be our ending instead of our beginning. And for those of you who don't know him, he is a comedian, a radio personality, and an amazing teacher advocate. And then we can all go over to the bar together and, have a party.
All right.
Of course, I'm buying drinks.
You have UTD, right?
All right, Mike.
UTD.
Hi, good evening. My name is James Cochran, and I am a proud member of New York City's United Federation of Teachers from the greatest borough in New York City, the great borough of Brooklyn. I teach at Erasmus campus right down the road from Clara Barton.
All right.
Yeah. I just got up in response to, what can we do, what are we doing, to help further this conversation. And I wanted to bring attention to what the United Federation of Teachers just passed at our last delegate assembly, a great resolution brought forward by Michael Mulgrew about celebrating what we're doing in our schools and with our communities in New York City this year. The whole theme of this school year for our union is celebrating the work we do, celebrating our strengths. In New York City, just like all across the country, for every local I've met, we've all been in a constant state of warfare, a constant state of conflict. And in New York, we had to put up with 12 years of Bloomberg, and now we're dealing with Governor Cuomo. And instead of feeling like a bunker mentality, and instead of feeling like we're all being beaten down all the time and everyone hates us, we're trying to change the tone of the conversation and get it away from responding to attacks and turn it into controlling the dialogue. We do good work. We do good things. We partner with, the LGBTQ community. We partner with the African American churches and communities in New York City. We are at the forefront of the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I mean, like, our face and our name is on everything because we partner with the people in our communities and we want their voices to be heard. And I heard a great thing yesterday in the Gallup presentation, how do students succeed? And the panel was about more like, how do people, period, succeed? One of the big things I took away from it was, in the last week, has someone praised you for something you've done, right? And I stopped to think about it, like, how often does my principal praise me? She does. I don't have an ogre for a principal. She's a little crazy. I mean, that's why I'm chapter leader. She's a little crazy, but, she does praise me every so often. But there are people on staff who don't get praised. They don't ever get acknowledged. And if we as a union, not just New York City, not just NYSUT in New York, if we as a union across the country take the time to praise each other, to constantly remind each other of our strengths, I think that has to be a key foundational principle in moving us forward.
Cool.
It's when we ask the question, what is professionalism? One of the pillars of that is our strength. Mm-hmm. What we all do on a daily basis throughout every school year. And we need to make sure we're telling each other that. I hear too many conversations in the teacher's lounge about how much my day sucked and how bad that kid was. And I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then the other voices in the room are, yeah, I know. Rather than,
sure thing.
You know what, you made an awesome lesson yesterday, and I'm glad I got to see it. And I wish I could intervisit your classroom more. We need to make sure that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Hello. Hi. I'm Joe Pacquiana from MS 390 in the Bronx.
Right.
Just to speak to the last person that spoke, we have an 80-minute meeting every Monday afternoon, and the principal always begins by celebrating something that he's seen in the classrooms throughout the week. So that might be a suggestion for your principal. What I'd like to know is, what is your, 5 years from now, what is your worst case scenario and your best case scenario? Worst first, please.
Okay, we're going to actually get to that in the next segment.
In the member mobilized piece.
So I would say, so let me actually, I'll run through the start of the next segment as I answer your question. And I think if somebody would put up just the resolution as I do this, it's probably probative, right?
There you go.
So one of the things we did, I know on Saturday we passed as the Executive Council, which meets about 4 times a year. It's about 45 people from all across the country. Everybody knows about the endorsement. But frankly, there was a more important resolution that we passed. This is just one of the resolve clauses. But there was a more important resolution that we passed. And this resolution, we have spent about 6 to 8 months talking about this, the organizing committee of the union. The union is a confederation of locals, essentially. We're 3,400 locals from across the country. And we really believe in ground-up unionism. The power is as close to the schools and to the locals and to our hospital sites and to our public employee sites and through our higher ed sites and our bus depots and on as you can get. Because that is just like what somebody said about the teacher's room. That's where people talk to each other. That's where people look at each other eye to eye. And so the nightmare scenario is that there will be unionism in 5 years from now. In fact, if you actually looked at a through line from the 1970s on, and I'm sorry, once a social studies teacher, always a social studies teacher.
That's right.
But if you look, in the 1970s, unions were community. We didn't have to think about a different community engagement plan because we were 1 out of every 3 people in our life, in some of our lifetimes. And what happened? I mean, when you talked about a union job, nobody thought it was working for Loretta or working for Mary Catherine or working for me. You thought about people worked in a plant or they worked somewhere else and they got a decent raise and they had health insurance and they had a pension and they had a vacation every now and then. But with deindustrialization, that's what happened in McDowell County, West Virginia, in terms of the coal mines just going bye-bye. In Baltimore, with the factories just going bye-bye. And then you see huge cyclical poverty, people not having jobs anymore. Public sector became the huge path for middle class for women and African Americans. So you saw that huge decrease in middle class jobs, huge decrease in unionization, and they were pretty much parallel. So now, private sector, less than 9% of the workers in the private sector are unionized. 30% of the workers in the public sector are unionized. How many English teachers do we have in the room? Remember the book, The Scarlet Letter? We all have a big A on our back. Because this is about power. And so what the Koch brothers and Crossroads and all these folks are doing is basically they're saying, okay, the recession, and the recessions killed the private sector labor movement. Let's kill the public sector labor movement. And that's what Scott Walker does when he says, get rid of collective bargaining. That's what Jeb Bush does when he says, we're going to pit teachers against their unions or kids against their unions. It's all about getting rid of us. And so what has happened in the last few years is that we have figured out with our strategies how to actually fight them on the merits. I'm not talking about merit pay. I'm talking about, because that is demerits. I'm talking about on the merits. Fight them toe-to-toe on issues. And we've learned how to do that. And we've also learned how to start working with communities about that. So now they're just going for the jugular. So that's what the Friedrichs case is about. It's not about individual liberty. It is about just like when they tried to starve government, they tried to starve schools, like in Philly. Now it's starve the unions by basically saying, and this is how pernicious it is, get 1 or 2 people to sue to say, California, I love my union, but I really don't want you involved in politics. Even though the California legislature basically does all of the rules for schools. It's kind of saying to us, don't get involved in trying to lobby No Child Left Behind. That's what it's basically saying. And so this case basically is going to say, that's going to be heard this year, whether we have a right that if we have the obligation to represent everyone, that everyone has to pay a fair share for that representation. Because their view is, and this is what they did to SEIU already after the other case. If the courts say, no, we don't have that right anymore, then what you're going to see in places all across America is the following. We know your wages are stagnant. The way you're going to get a wage increase is just give up your union dues. We've already seen it. That's what's going to happen. So give up your power, starve the union. About 8 states tried that this year after we lost all those elections but one this year, Pennsylvania. And Helen Gim talked about that. So the worst case scenario, and that's why I explained it this way, is that all this stuff will happen and we won't have an effective reaction. That's the worst case scenario. This, where is that resolution? Sorry. This is the best case scenario, the resolution that was up before. Sorry. This is what your executive council, this is what your union is trying to do, and others as well.
There you go.
Which is, sorry, I have asthma, so do you mind if I do this? What?
No, go ahead.
Thanks. It just is easier for me to stand and speak. So I am tired of reacting to the bad guys. And we had that gentleman from UFT, Jordan? James, who said the same thing, which is, how do we actually do the things we need to do to actually fight forward? And when you fight for joy, just like for joy of teaching and learning, that's a pretty empowering fight too. Fighting based upon love sometimes is as enduring as fighting based upon hate.
Right.
And so what we're saying, and this resolution is basically from what we've learned. It's not pie in the sky. The bats have learned it. Other people in the audience who have seen things turn around because of engagement of members and community engagement have learned it as well. Which is, the moment someone does something within the union, whether it's going to a meeting, whether it's doing an email, whether it's going to a demonstration, whether it's doing a survey, which now, as Jamie said, is now part of an amendment to the ESEA. It's, it doesn't, we're not going to solve the problems of the world in one step. So if we get 2 more people to do engagement, meaning we triple our engagement. We have 1 now, let's say we get 2 or 3 more people in a school to do anything. Say the school, for example, you don't have paper to do the copying that you need for things for your kids. Let's do something that creates an action to get that paper, because that is a term and condition of employment that any boss outside of public education does for their workers.
That's right.
So we do that instead of immediately thinking we're going to take it out of our pocket. And we have an action like that. We have a meeting. We go to the local. We go to the school board, 50 of us instead of just 1 of us. Those are actions. And what ends up happening is that people feel really good about it. And they all kind of go to the bar afterwards, or they do something afterwards, or as I said, remember, we looked at that school board member and we said, in your law firm, do you have to pay for your own paper? And people are like, what are you talking about? So what I'm saying is, that's one example. But that's part of this notion of tripling the amount of engagement. We do this all the time. Social media, a tweet. People change when they feel like they have some control over their own destiny. And 2 or 3 or 4 of those actions make a union activist. So if we double the number of union activists, if we triple the number of times we're doing any kind of engagement, you heard Loretta talk about all sorts of other engagement with community, social justice, anything. And we start thinking about how on our 100th anniversary, we talk to all of our members. Not simply Loretta, Mary Catherine, and I, but frankly, those of you who know me, I'd love to talk to all of our members. Sharon might hate it if I tried to talk to all of our members, my partner, but I love to talk to all of us. But remember, from the ground up, if we start doing that, and remember what Mary Catherine said, having each other's back, talking to each other about our goals and aspirations, about the challenges we face, deconstructing it to fight back on that. If we do that, in 5 years from now, not only will we have saved the union movement, we will have saved public education and have rebalanced the economy. Because what these guys are more afraid of than anything else is that little ditty, "The people united will never be divided."
That's right. That's right.
So I'm glad you asked, but instead of just saying, "We hate Friedrichs and they're horrible people," they are. But what are we going to do about it in a proactive way that brings community together with us?
Yep.
Where we fight for the things we need: decent wages, decent retirement, a democracy that hears the people, where people can walk through the streets without being fearful of excessive police violence, where immigrants don't fear that their parents are going to be yanked from them and deported. That's who we are as a union. And so that's why the last piece was, this was our resolution. I know you see a lot of other things, but that was the nub of it. And the real question becomes, over the course of this 100th year, that starts now and ends in basically July 17, how are we going to do all of this? But I promise you, if we do, we keep growing. We're one of the few unions that do. But more than growth, it is we will regain that movement that helps all Americans climb the ladder of economic and education opportunity.